Hello, you are watching Metamorphosis on Southland TV. I am your host, Renee Tabor, and here in the studio I have Eileen Walsh. Eileen is starting a new concept called ethical wills, at least it's new to us. However, as we learn more and discover, it is actually a practice that's been around for a while. I don't want to steal your thunder, Eileen, so I'm going to ask you some questions, but you're also hosting a show here on Southland TV called Your Ethical Will by Eileen Walsh. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Thank you, Renee, for having me. Thank you for watching, and I'm just delighted to be here this morning and talk to you about my beloved subject, ethical wills. It's something I'm so excited about, very passionate about, and making it my mission to bring it to the world.
What is an ethical will?
An ethical will is a journey. It's a journey into your life, your past, to reflect on your life lessons and what you have learned, what your stories are, what your values and beliefs that have come from those stories. It's really something you're going to write to tell those coming after you what your life has meant. It's a beautiful amalgam of your ancestry, your past, your experiences, what you learned from them, your lessons, your pearls of wisdom, what you're grateful for, your love and hope and blessings for those coming after you. And it's a tremendous process. And if you write this ethical will, it has double value. I love to say it's a win-win because it's healing and transformative and therapeutic and life-affirming for you in the writing of the document. And it is just a rich, valuable gift beyond measure for those coming after you. For you have given them the value of your hard-earned wisdom, your life lessons, and perhaps provide light in the darkness for someone coming after you that you might never have met. It's a beautiful process.
How is an ethical will different from a traditional will?
Both are firmly within my wheelhouse, so I'm well qualified to tell you the difference. Renee, I'm an estate planning attorney. This is what I do, legal wills. And if I'll just tell you a little bit about me and my background and how I came to this. So I've always loved story, and I grew up in rural Ireland, very much in the storytelling soup and the oral tradition. I'm one of 12 children. We lived way in the country. I didn't have electricity or phone or inside plumbing or any of those modern things we know that our children take for granted. So it's still very much a tradition where we listened to stories, where old people told stories, and everyone listened. I often think of my father and uncle. They could have these long pauses in their stories, and everyone waited. Now you stop for 1 second, everyone jumps in because we're used to kind of this very, very fast pace. So I grew up in that storytelling tradition, so had an intuitive feel for it and an appreciation for it in my veins. When I became a lawyer, I first practiced in criminal law, and that was exciting. I have great stories from that, but I knew it wasn't truly where I belonged, and I moved into private practice, discovered estate planning, and there I found my home. I loved working with people, help them talk about their life. Estate planning, writing wills and trusts is very much a matter of, it's sensitive. We talk about assets, we talk about our stories. So it was an area where you really had to help people to be comfortable to talk about their stories, and their needs are wrapped in stories. So people talk to us, they tell us about what they have, how they accumulated it, whom they wanted to go to, who isn't getting something and why. So I had to unravel and unwrap that to determine what belonged in the legal will. And the only thing that belongs in a legal will is who is in charge and who is getting what. Stories muddy up legal documents, but that storyteller in me appreciated and loved that our clients wanted to tell their stories, and I felt that their stories were as valid a part of their legacy as their physical wealth. So I discovered and resurrected and made modern this wonderful tradition of an ethical will. Now, these ethical wills started out thousands of years ago, very much in the Jewish tradition of the patriarch telling the sons how to live their lives, hence the word ethical. But over the centuries, it has just evolved. Women took it on board. Of course, the first women didn't even have property, weren't encouraged to write. But we, being the memory vessels and the storytellers, when women took this on board, we really ran with it. So it has been there over the years. I have taken it. I saw how valuable this was in addition to legal documents. I saw that we in this modern world have a penchant now for disclosure. Our modern social media, encourages disclosure over a locked diary. And also we love these storytelling stories, like these programs like This American Life and This I Believe. So I felt that the time was right to take this ancient tradition, make it modern, and help everyone realize that they have this very valuable gift and story within them. Our world feels a little bit broken now, and I feel like, what if we could heal the world by giving everyone a platform to tell their story, share their story, feel worthwhile, and make other people worthwhile, and just leave this wonderful gift of our wisdom and our lessons to our daughters and granddaughters in our community and our church and the world. A grand mission, but one I feel very passionate about, and one that I want to get started making happen.
That is outstanding. I do have a question. I know that a lot of people tend to be a little anxious when you're talking about end-of-life plans or wills. Is the ethical will a good segue to preparing a traditional will? Do you find that makes it less intimidating, perhaps, for people?
Well, I have found that when people are ready, and you do need to be ready, I've discovered that over the years, to really start writing a will. Often what happens is that there is some trigger. There's either a diagnosis that we have ourselves, someone in the family get diagnosed, someone dies, there's an awful legal mess, and people say, it's time for me to make sure my family don't go through that. So people have to be ready to take care of their legal affairs. And when they are, that's when this morass of facts and stories and history attached to the asset starts coming to the fore. And as I said earlier, it's our job to sort of separate those. Now, there's such value to writing an ethical will. And this is me, an estate planning attorney, saying this, and I don't say it lightly, because I so encourage people daily to write their legal wills, even if you're not there. And often people do say to me, why would I do a legal will? I have nothing to give. And I say, oh, yes, you do. So if you don't want to take care of the legal documents, you have riches untold in this beautiful story. So I think there's a point for everyone to start. You don't have to be anticipating death. But the reality is, Renee, that life happens. What I've discovered in life and in my practice is that accidents happen, illnesses get diagnosed, death comes, diminished capacity. So if only we all would take the step to write this document before we're robbed of the opportunity to do so. And then when we get started, so even if we're not ready to take care of the legal yet, we see how valuable and therapeutic and wonderful it is. And as you were saying earlier when we were speaking before we went on air, people sometimes don't even realize the meaning and purpose of their life. When they start writing this document, they go in and start seeing themselves. My life is worthwhile. It does mean something. All that brokenness, everything that I healed, everything that I came from, there's something valuable in there, and I can teach others and I can share with others. And one of the things I love about my ethical will business, because when I discovered, Renee, how valuable it was with my legal clients, and I took it out to my personal growth audience, and I started teaching seminars and workshops, it's unbelievably healing and life affirming for people to do this. And then we would always have a sharing circle where at the end of a weekend, and one of the beautiful things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is that I have made this easy to do. People share, and there's not a dry eye in the house, because everyone's story is so precious and so valuable and so meaningful and worthwhile, and people inspire and entertain, and they heal and get healed, and forgive and get forgiven through the telling of their story. There's nothing intimidating. Probably the most intimidating thing about the process is the size and volume of your own life. So how do you start? Where do you start? How do you avoid getting bogged down, getting overwhelmed? And that is where I believe the beauty of the program that I've put together. Because I've been doing this now for 10 years, I see the difficulty for people sitting down to talk about their life. I had one gentleman at a seminar I taught in Aurora who said, I just can never get past the war. So I have developed a program where I help people get through it section by section. We don't need your entire life story. We just need a little bubble, a capsule, something that captures your essence, something that provides a place that you had in this universe for this short while. So it doesn't have to be a book-length memoir. I start with telling people how to get started. Just dear, is this going to be to your friend, a sister, your child, your grandchild? Then we move through early life experiences, memories, a childhood toy, a teacher, severe, benevolent. We work through stories. Then we glean the values and beliefs from those stories. Then we move on to wisdom and advice and gratitude, and I teach them how to end it. And the beauty of my system is that as you're writing it, you don't see the architecture, you don't see the structural logic that is there. So when you're done, all we have to do is just strip away the titles. You have this beautiful archival letter that flows seamlessly, section to section. I haven't let you get bogged down. We have finished it. And when I have taught seminars on this, Renee, people are a little frustrated when I move them on because they're with their first love, they're having their first child, they're in their adoption story, they're not ready to move on. But I make them because we've got to get it done. You might say, well, let me finish this and I'll finish it at home. Oh no, I know, it won't get finished. So we move right through, we get it written, we pull it together, and it's seamless and it's beautiful. And each section, I like to say, is the cousin of the other. And you might, after having written this and started to uncover your past, you might get an appetite for more. By all means, write it, expand it, add photographs, add ancestry, genealogy. But get this first one done. Because unfortunately, that's often the only reflection that gets left.
That is outstanding. How long is that process? Is it a one-day seminar? Is it a class? What does that look like?
This document can be written, I would say, give yourself a weekend. So we're not talking about weeks or months. And because of the way that it's structured, Renee, you don't have to have one solid sitting. You can start it, you can get your first section written. But I like the idea, and that's why I love to teach weekend seminars on this, so we just get it started and get it finished. But you can write your first section, you can revisit it, write your second, and I use the rule of threes. Every section is also divided into threes, and you're usually just writing one page, and each one of those three, either lessons or memories or things you're grateful for. And as we move through that, then we get to the close. So you don't have to do it all at one time. I recommend getting it done just for the sheer value of completion and then the value of sharing it. I also don't ask you to get a precious notebook. The sun doesn't have to be slanting through just so. You can write it anywhere, write it in anything. It's the words. It's your words. It's the richness of your life and your experiences. You have it all inside you. Everything you need is right inside you. You don't need any kind of history book. Just get it written, get it down, and make sure that your link in the generations, your place in history is preserved. And then you survive. You survive even death. I often say to my audiences, everything can be taken from you. Your home, your health, your partner, your country, your breast. But they cannot take your story. Your story remains in what you learned from that and what you came through. And your story can survive even death, with you providing this beautiful capsule of your place in this time, in this great universe, this place in history.
And like you said, even just constructing the bare bones, you can go back and you can pepper in other stories or expand in certain areas. You did touch a little bit on genealogy, and I find that to be very interesting because I know a lot of people that study genealogy, and what's so interesting about that is that you learn about your ancestry and how people typically where they were born and where they died, but you lose that whole spectrum in the middle, and you might figure some things out depending on how they died, but you don't know how they really lived. And so I really value that component of the ethical will, because there are things I know I'd like to know about my ancestors, and other people I imagine would like the same. So I think that's a really great thing that you're doing for people.
And absolutely. And do you know, it has often been asked, if something was found in the attic of an old family home, and it was either a letter from your great grandfather, your great grandmother, or a $10,000 bond, which would you choose? And people invariably choose that letter. Who did I come from? What was their life like? What did they do? What was their school like? Who did they play with? How did they sleep? All these things. We so take for granted our place in the world. And I think the cell phone is really is a way for us to realize that what we take for granted wasn't that way a generation ago, and won't be another generation from now. We can be sure our parents had no idea of a cell phone. That's such a modern concept, and now it's in every one of our hands. And our children, I just read in Time magazine, 10 is the average age now for a child to get a cell phone. What will the next generation be, and what will be lost from the generation that went before? So it's almost our duty to make sure that link that you provide, that place that you inhabit, the here and now, is preserved and can be added to the photographs and the genealogy and all those other wonderful things we do to preserve our place. But your words and your story, I believe, are the glittering jewels, the most valuable piece of all.
And in terms of preserving, when someone is done with their ethical will, is it a hard copy? Is it digital? What format do they walk home with so that they can preserve this?
My absolute favorite is a handwritten letter, 12, 15, 20 pages on archival paper, to be stored with the legal documents. And if you don't have any legal documents, just to be stored with whatever important papers are in your home. That's my favorite, because I think the handwritten word adds even more value to the portrait of who you are. It doesn't have to be. I'm not a good handwriter, so I understand that not everyone is. But I will say my own parents are 87 and 90, and I'm so lucky to still have them. And if I even just get their name signed to a Christmas card, it just fills me with a sense of history and roots and belonging, that nothing written by my sister, of who of course is helping him at this stage, or typed. Mm-hmm. So handwritten is beautiful, but a luxury, by no means a necessity. You can do this in the computer. You can, even if you can no longer speak, because if we're robbed of the ability to be able to write, and one of the things I learned in my practice too, we take so for granted just to write. When I see some of my either very elderly or very sick patients, my clients who no longer even can sign their name, that an initial is a huge burden, I have learned so much about life and death and the space in between from my estate planning clients. So it can be written, it can be typed. If you type it, print out a copy and keep it with your legal documents, as well as storing it digitally. Make sure, and I recommend sharing it right away, and most of the people who write these do, because they love it so much and they think, my children could use these stories and values now. If you choose not to share it, if this truly is something that you only wanted disseminated after your death, make sure that whomever is taking care of your affairs knows where it is and when you would want it read. Would you want it read at a ceremony? Would you want to have a little private family get together, and that's at the point that you would wish for it to be shared? So make sure, now that you've written it, you choose when to share it. Make sure that someone knows where it is and what you want done with it. And here's something else. Now this again is luxury, icing on the cake. We can rewrite our ethical will, because we're different people at different stages of our life. We're different when we're happily married than after we've gone through a divorce. We're a different person if we're going through infertility and after we've had a child, or not, or gone through adoption. So we're different people at different stages in our life. So it's beautiful if we have one written, but we could rewrite it. I wrote my first ethical will in 2006. I just had 2 of my little guys. After I had my 4 boys, I thought, I went back in just to write the 4 names in there. But then I realized this was before the business downturn, before my husband and I had gone through so much, because I was doing real estate a lot at the time and he was building, and this huge lesson that we had to learn from everything not being as smooth as it was in the early 2000s just simply wasn't in there. So I rewrote it, and it was a richer, older, and by rich, I by no means in terms of financial riches. It was someone who knew more, who was a little wiser, who would have something to say that I didn't have to say before. So you not just write it, but maybe revisit it at certain points in your life. There are landmark times that people typically will write this, and a really good time is a marriage, or the birth of a child, or the marriage of your child, or becoming a widow, or writing your legal documents and now contemplating death and thinking in much more finite terms than maybe we thought about in our 30s or 20s, when everything just felt so endless and limitless, the possibility. As we draw in, I often think of life as this sphere where we start very small, and then our sphere of influence gets very wide, and then it becomes very narrow again. And as we narrow back in, we've had all that living and might have a different perspective. Again, Renee, from sitting with estate planning, the legal type can be done at any stage of life, but often people are older, they maybe have an illness, they're very reflective, and I feel that I've learned so much from what they have had to taught me about their life and their assets, and the dignity and just respect that people have for the life, and how they approach end of life. So much wisdom, and I want us all to share it.
What is your vision for the future of ethical wills as you see it?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. So I've already taken my ethical will business from my legal business and taken it out to the world at large. I often think there's only so many people I can stand in front of and teach this to physically. So I have developed the online course where now I can make sure that everyone, not just my jurisdiction of Illinois, but I can bring this to the whole world by being able to make the online course available. My audience now, as it has been with my estate planning, is very much the retiring baby boomers, those who've accumulated wealth, have a story, came out of the kitchens, burned their bras, went into the boardroom, went to war. They've changed the world and they know it. So these are the people who are writing their ethical wills and leaving that tremendous legacy. But what I would love to do is I want more sharing of those stories. So I want to start a movement of sharing. I'd love to start a community of sharing where we have this communal healing and forgiveness and realizing our worth through our stories. And then, Renee, I'd love to take this to the disenfranchised and those who don't have access to the internet, or aren't easily going to purchase an online course, don't have that sort of education or opportunity. When I spoke earlier that I was in criminal defense, I was a public defender. And one of the groups of people that I defended were prostitutes, those accused of prostitution.
Right.
And when I was in that area, I went in, young attorney, straight out of law school, believing that someone would have chosen that life as a profession. Oh, Renee, what did I learn? Addiction and sexual abuse and run away from an early age. These women had tremendous stories. And all I could do for them was try to get them the best deal that was possible. They always just wanted to get out of custody, and there was only so much I could do to try to get them into rehabilitation. But they have always stayed with me, and that's 17 years ago. I want to go back now and teach them how valuable their story was, because to a girl, to a woman, they felt worthless. Right. And I want them to know that their story matters, that their life is as valuable as those who have had the opportunity to be successful and to be educated and to be in the boardrooms. So I love the idea of taking the healing nature and the sense of value and worth to those who are never going to realize it on their own. So I really have this wonderful part vision, part mission, part passion to take this concept out into the world and heal some of the brokenness that we see, day after day.
So sharing the stories of survivors is what I'm hearing.
Surviving even death.
Wow, that is amazing. I thank you so much for being here and for taking the time and sharing your mission, and not just with me and with our audience, but also within the community and throughout the nation. What would your one takeaway be for our audience that's watching right now? What is one thing above all else that you want them to know?
Everyone's life is valuable. everyone's story is worthwhile. And if there was a fiery crash tomorrow, have you told your family what you would want them to know? Do they know what your life meant? Do they know what your family history was, your homeland, what you came through? Have you told them the story? Have you told them what you have learned? And have you told them about your love and your wishes and your blessings for them? If you haven't told them the story, start today. Let's get it written. I'm here to help you. I believe everybody's story is healing, and I help them to tell it. I think everybody's life is a gift, and I help them to wrap it.
Thank you, Eileen, and thank you for watching Metamorphosis on Southland TV.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.